Hi, everyone. I'm Tess Mashazik. I am an instructor with the Harvard Professional Development Programs, as well as the head of research with the Korn Ferry Institute. I have, in my experience, I've been teaching through the Harvard Professional Development Program for the past couple of years. We teach a course called the Positive Workplace and with Michael that we will tell you a little bit more about later in today's webinar. But my work today also with the Korn Ferry Institute is that we focus on looking at different aspects of talent management, the recruitment, the development, the retainment, and the retention, and being able to really develop strategies around how to care for a diverse, multi-generational workplace. And so today we're really excited to talk to you about how to develop a workplace that makes people happier to come to work. So Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Tessa. Hi, everyone. So good to see so many people here today. I've been teaching at Harvard University for about 12 years, mostly entrepreneurship and innovation. For executive ed, I also teach a sales course. And during my career, I actually have a Wall Street background. I retired about 20 years ago from a firm I started in my mid-20s. And retirement was actually really depressing. And I realized that you really need to like some of the jobs that you have. I've actually had about 7 startups. And I really started to see that since you spend about half of your waking life at work, it's incredibly important. And during COVID, I went to the University of Pennsylvania to get a master's degree in positive psychology. And I was fortunate enough to have Dr. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, to be my professor. And my thesis was on what makes people thrive and flourish at work. And this ended up becoming this class. And we've had just some really interesting research on learning what really makes people engage at work and how can you actually operationalize that into your own organization. So Tessa, how about we just begin?
Great. So what we want to do to kick us off is that we'd like to do a little bit of a survey. So we have here a QR code. If you have your phone readily available, you can go ahead and scan the QR code. That will take you straight into our poll. Or you can enter in the link here, and I believe the link is going to be put into chat as well. It's on menti.com. So I'm just going to give you about 10 seconds or so to go ahead and get into the poll. And then I'm going to pull up the poll. Within the poll, we have 2 questions. The first is, if you could eliminate an aspect of your work to make you happier, what would it be? And then there's going to be a second question, which is, if you could create a new aspect of your work to make you happier, what would it be? So hopefully everyone is in. And again, I believe it's in the chat is the link. Yes, thank you
Yep,
so
popped
much,
up.
Whitney. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the poll now. And what we can see is for the first question, if you could eliminate an aspect of your work to make you happier, what would it be? So here you can see what everyone's putting in. This is a word cloud. So as we calculate, you'll see the bigger the word, the more responses. So Michael, I'm going to let you go ahead and debrief this.
Okay, thank you, Tessa. So you can see the one word that keeps popping up here is stress. So the larger the word and the word cloud, that's what most people are talking about. So what we see here is we have stress, we have confusion, we have conflict. We were also seeing a lot of long hours. One of the things that we've noticed with organizations that do have incredibly engaged people is they're not terribly stressed. They actually jump out of bed. They are excited to go to work. They don't have stress because they have so much meaning and purpose in what they're doing. And what's interesting is that if you really feel that what you're doing at work is helping other people on some level, whatever that is, then your stress level can go down. Another thing that we've also noticed, we come up with things called positive interventions. These are things that you could actually do to make the workplace better. And we know that a lot of people are on hybrid work or strictly on Zoom. What we suggest you do when you do come into a Zoom meeting in the beginning, because people will dribble in over time, it takes a few minutes to get that meeting started. when you have your facilitator in the meeting, let's say that you're the facilitator, just ask people, what's new and good? What is a new and good thing that happened to you in the last day, the last week? You could also ask people, what are you grateful for? We have looked at the research. One of my professors was Dr. Barbara Fredrickson, and she studied positive emotions. What is the point of a positive emotion? And what she discovered is that if you talk about what's good in the day to start that meeting, it puts you into a more positive frame. But physically, what happens is that your peripheral vision, this is her research, will actually expand. So when someone asks you to be creative or innovative or come up with an interesting idea, you actually start to see more because you have greater peripheral vision and you become more creative. You actually get better ideas. So we always like to start these meetings, whether it's going to be gratitude or something you appreciate, depending on your culture. Appreciation tends to be very multicultural because it could be, I really appreciated the sunset that I saw today, or I had a really good workout. When it comes to miscommunication, we find that only 7% of written communication is understood. About 55% of communication is body language. 34% is tone of voice, 7% is the written word. So typically emails and texts are what gets misunderstood. That can get people stressed out. When you have that and you feel it might be a miscommunication, go to the telephone, and so that you can get the tone of voice. If that doesn't work, then meet in person. So we wanted to spend just about 3 minutes on the eliminate. So hopefully these little tips are going to be helpful for you. And if you come to our regular class, we'll give you a ton more. Tessa, let's switch to the new one. What would you like to create?
So if everyone's still on the poll, or you can go ahead and put in the code to menti.com, you can now answer the second question, which is if you could create a new aspect of your work to make you happier, what would it be? So what would you create? Ooh.
Oh, mindfulness room. I love it. Okay, keep going. More collaboration, work-life balance, learnings, reasonable pay, inclusion, fully remote. That's an interesting one. Creativity. Oh, I love it. Creativity is the biggest one. And we've got still more popping in here. So we have about 20 data points. So creativity, work-life balance, creativity just keeps getting bigger. Okay, reasonable pay. Okay, so let's start debriefing on this one. The creativity is interesting. Again, with work from Barbara Fredrickson, if you want people to be more creative, the best thing to do is put them into that positive frame of mind. Joking around at the office is actually a really good idea. And with the creativity, when you do brainstorming, we encourage you to do something that we take from improvisational classes, which is called yes and. So let's say that Tessa and I are brainstorming and we want to decide what color carpet should we get. And she says, I want purple. And let's say I want blue. If she says, I want purple, it's not a good idea for me to say, Tessa, that's not really a good color. It's going to stain. Why don't we do blue? Because Tessa might be shut down or not feeling psychologically safe to come up with other ideas. So what I should respond to when she says, I want purple carpeting, I would say yes. And I think blue carpeting would be great because it would hide the stains a little bit better. So I actually haven't commented on her contribution, and it makes her feel psychologically safe to keep making other ideas. And typically, it's not the first idea that is the best one, it's the second and the third and the fourth. Also, our quieter people, let's say our introverts in the organization, they are amazing listeners. They need psychological safety and they have great ideas because they absorb so much information. So we really need to be protective of everyone to feel safe so that they can put their ideas into the room. And when an idea is amazing, everyone just goes, oh, that's it. So you really don't have to comment on all the ideas, just keep throwing them in and the really good one is going to be popping up. I see also here collaboration. One thing that we've really noticed, especially with the Gen Z population, They love to learn and they want to learn fast. So what we have learned is if you had an emerging leadership board for the younger generation, along with a mentor to help bring them onto the table, give them a voice so that they feel valued because they are valued. They are our next generation that's going to be leading the world. We need to support them, and they actually want to learn much faster than some of the other generations that we've had in the past. And also make sure that you give them learning opportunities, give them a budget to go to workshops, anything that they want. It doesn't have to be directly related to their role. We also believe in having a cross mentorship, meaning they are being mentored and someone is mentoring them. So some of the younger generations could do mini mentorship to get some of the older population up to speed on tech. And some of the older generations can help the younger generations learn things like wisdom and patience and judgment. How do you actually look 4 years ahead on a decision? So I love all these contributions, and we are at our 3 minutes. So Tessa, let's keep moving.
Okay, great. So I am going to now toggle back over to our slide presentation and keep us moving forward. There you go, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So this is our positive workplace class. You'll see that some of our classes are 2 days in a row on campus in Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We also have online programs which go for 4 weeks at a time. So you'll have a 2 to 3 hour session weekly for 4 weeks. And depending on where you are, I'd encourage you to consider, people love to come on campus because there's great networking. It's just really fun to see people in person. It's very exciting to see the Harvard campus. It's really inspirational. But the online program also is interesting because we will teach you something in week 1. We send you out into the real world to try it at your organization. Then you come back for week 2 to tell us what worked, what didn't work, what needs to be tweaked, and we keep rinsing and repeating through the 4 cycles. So depending on where you are, we have both options for you. So we'd love to see you if you'd like to take our class. And we just have put in the chat, could we put in the registration link? So we will be doing that. So Whitney will help us out. The next is that our class ended up being really popular, and we got picked up by Forbes magazine. And from the Forbes magazine article, we created the Happy at Work podcast, which is on Spotify. We have been ranked number 15 in the world for our category, and we interview top CEOs around the world about what works for them. And during COVID, work has changed so much that it has been incredibly rich conversations to see leaders of major corporations try to figure out, what do we do with this unknown future, knowing that we really can't go back to the past. So all our interviews, we have them once a week. And they're only about 25 minutes long. So feel free to go to Spotify. That's where most people get the information. And Tessa's going to be sharing you some deep dives on some of the other CEOs that we have interviewed that she thinks would be really helpful for this class today. So now what we want to take a look at is, why does this class matter? And why does it matter to get employees to be engaged at work? If you take a look at the metrics, someone who loves their job, meaning they're leaning in, they really like it, they perform 83% above the company average. These people who are engaged are superstars in the organization, and they need to be cultivated and they need to be retained. And retention is an issue. And we'll teach you how to retain people. Also, when it comes to just strictly money, they actually have 26% higher revenue per employee versus unengaged employees. So the money's there, the number's there, and it actually is worth HR taking a look at why we should make sure people are happy at work. So this is a Gallup survey, and what it takes a look at is people who are in service industries as well as manufacturing industries, and they find that you have almost 40% less absenteeism as well as presenteeism. Presenteeism is basically, my body is at work, but my head is somewhere else. So I'm basically goofing off. Maybe I'm on my phone. I'm not really working. I'm just sort of there. People who are in areas where they can be dealing with, let's say, heavy machinery, almost 50% cut in safety incidents because they're paying attention to the details. People who are in manufacturing, product defects drop by over 40%. And this has something to do with sustainability. Imagine when something that you buy from Amazon comes, it doesn't work very well, you send it back, that may just go into a landfill. So there's a lot to be said about making sure that physical products are made properly. And then again, productivity over 20% bump, you also get higher profitability over 20% again. So it pays to make sure that people in your organization are happy. And this is my favorite canoe to take a look at. The blue are people who are engaged. So about 1 out of 3 people in an organization are actually engaged. So 1 out of 3 are really, notice how they're really leaning in. They really love to be there. About half of employees, and these are global numbers, are not engaged, which means they're just doing what they were hired to do, but nothing extra. So this is where the quiet quitters are. And notice how the people in orange don't have oars. The people in blue have oars because it's the people with the oars in blue that move the organization forward. The 19% of actively disengaged, that's about 1 in 5. See how they're ready to jump off the back of the boat? These people are actually dangerous for an organization. They are contagious to the not engaged and the engaged. So imagine that you walk into a room of healthy people and one person has a cold. That one person that has a cold going into a room of sick people, that one person will infect the healthy people and give them a cold. Now you would think, oh, well, what if I took an unengaged person and brought them into an organization where everyone is engaged? Won't that lift them up? No, they will drag the engaged down. Those people actually need to be dealt with sooner than later because they actually act basically like an illness into the organization. So we'll be talking, we actually deep dive quite a bit about how you handle actively disengaged people. We do suggest you spend more time making sure that your engaged employees are engaged and get more engaged. So you ask them, why are you engaged? Why do you love working here? What can I do more for you? You will get more benefit out of spending time on the engaged and getting them happier than spending time on the disengaged and trying to get them happy. I would also spend time on the people on the orange. The not engaged have a chance to become engaged, but the actively disengaged might be better off working somewhere else. It sounds a little bit harsh, but the research shows a lot of people regret not getting rid of people sooner. And a lot of people also notice that some really engaged employees will go back into not engaged because they're not given any attention. No one is trying to make sure that they thrive. They just think, oh, look, you're great. You don't need any attention. Yes, they do. Everyone needs to be, every plant needs to be watered. Let's take a look at our next slide. We did mention this. If you go to happyatworkpodcast.com, that will give you links to all of our CEO interviews. We also interview authors and researchers. We recently just posted our latest interview, which was a panel of interviewing Gen Z workers. And it was so good because what they had to say is not what employers are doing. Employers are kind of guessing what they think people want. And we just say, why don't you ask them what they want? So that episode, they're going to tell you. So feel free to take a look at our latest episode. And next slide. Okay, Tessa.
Great, thanks, Michael. So what we want to do now is we want to dive into some of the lessons that we've learned from CEOs. And again, within the context of the Positive Workplace course, we actually teach not just these highlights, but also the strategies that go behind some of these lessons learned from top CEOs around the world. So the first interview we want to talk about was with co-founder of Moderna, Dr. Robert Langer. And obviously Moderna having a very strong purpose over the last few years, being tied to the pandemic and being able to generate one of the major vaccinations with regards to COVID-19. And so when we asked, and we actually interviewed Dr. Langer during the pandemic, and when we asked about things like return to office, a lot of the kind of somewhat mundane topics that we hear people talking about throughout different industries, throughout the workplace today, It was really interesting because for Moderna, he really spoke about purpose and the fact that because the folks that work at Moderna have a very strong purpose, and they're really, this purpose is operationalized throughout the entire organization. Some might look at Moderna or other companies like other life sciences or biotech companies and say, well, the purpose might be obvious, right? They're developing the vaccine for COVID-19. But the truth is, the purpose can be part of any company. There's obviously a lot of founder-led companies like Patagonia or North Face or Tom Shoes that we all kind of think of because they have these business models where purpose is built into the strategy of the organization. But really, all companies should be considered, should be considering a purpose-led strategy that really helps develop that North Star, that helps ground the workplace, helps ground the employee workforce to really think about, why is it that I'm doing this work? What's the impact that I'm making, not just on the company, perhaps not just on our customers, but on society as a whole. And so being able to be really connected to that purpose really does help drive the importance of the work and the impact that the work can make. It really is something that you believe in on a daily basis. And so it yields much higher productivity and motivation for people who are connected to companies that have a strong purpose. When we asked Professor Langer around strategies related to burnout, he actually told some amazing stories. And again, you can hear the actual whole interview on our podcast, happyatwork.com, podcast.com. But he talks specifically about how he was rejected early in his career. He couldn't get an academic or research position. He ended up getting his first research academic position with the nutrition department of a university, and he faced a lot of negativity, and he really got used to that level of criticism, but it made him stronger. He really saw it as an opportunity to learn and to grow, and having that growth mindset. He also talked about well-being and the importance of exercise. Now, he runs a lot, 10 to 12 miles a day. I don't think that's an expectation that anyone needs to set on themselves, but he did talk about the importance of taking time out to really physically physically take care of your well-being, which really has positive impact on your mental health as well. And again, it's about being able to balance the level of criticism, humbling you, keeping your humility intact, especially when you're someone who's really at the forefront of science and really doing incredibly impactful research, and to understand that well-being at the core is everything, because if you don't have your health, as people say, you don't have anything. And then when we asked about what skills do you think individuals who are entering the workforce need in today's world, he really did talk about being able to take calculated risks and having organizations recognize that failure is okay. And we're going to talk in a moment more about how do you create a culture where people feel comfortable to take calculated risks. And that's really related to psychological safety. So being able to take those risks, again, making failure as part of the innovation process, understanding that being nice to others and kindness and empathy is important. Creativity and asking big transformative questions often lead to a purpose-led organization. So we saw creativity as being one of the main pillars of what you were saying that you would like to see more of to make it a happier workplace. And that makes sense, because in purpose-led organizations, creativity really is at the core of asking those big questions that can make a big impact. So again, the key takeaway here were embrace high risk, high reward projects, be okay with failure, be good, do good, and be creative, ask those big questions. Our second interview was with the CEO of Aston Martin, Otmar Szafnauer, and he was quite a character. You can actually see more about him on their Netflix special, which is Formula One Drive to Survive. But Otmar, just told some amazing stories, again, about early in his career and what he feels, working for the type of company where leadership and teamwork is not just something that's nice to have, or having a collaborative environment is not just makes for a better workplace environment, but it actually can be about life and death, right? And that you have to be able to create those types of environments where people can really learn from their mistakes, so that those types of failures don't happen again, because again, it can really mean life or death for the driver who's in that seat. So how do you keep such a large team cohesive or working collaboratively? First of all, he was incredibly humble, and he realized that there's a real social aspect to being able to create teams, that you cannot think of just yourself, but that you have to think about the whole of the team, and that you have to let, again, that purpose and what's good for the team transcend any sort of self need that you might have. Understanding that a team that works together wins at every level, and that a high performing team requires psychological safety. So what is psychological safety? Psychological safety, and again, we dive into this quite a bit in our course, but it's really about creating a culture where people feel that they can speak up without judgment, that they feel that they can give feedback, that they can be able to comment on certain aspects of the business without the risk of being judged, or without the risk of feeling like they're going to get, accused of something, or being yelled at, or something along those lines. And so it does take time to develop a culture of psychological safety. It's not something you can kind of do overnight, but it does take time, and it is something that can be cultivated and operationalized, again, through structures of the organization, as well as from a leadership perspective. So again, learning from mistakes to not repeat them, and creating that learning mindset and that psychological safety throughout the entire team is really important. The next question was, how do you cultivate trust? And again, obviously, the smaller the team, the more you get to know your teammates, and the easier that is. But again, it's learned and it's earned, and this happens over time. And it really is such an important question for leadership to consider, that they really have to model the behavior that would allow for this trust to be able to be embedded into the culture of the organization. That you have to treat your team with the respect for what they know, and not chastise them for what they don't know. And this is also, as we look at what is happening in the workforce today, with so much change happening in the marketplace, with so many different types of geopolitical tensions, supply chain interruptions, with so much change happening in the workplace, that it really has to be, in order to create that change-ready organization, that you really respect that the expertise isn't necessarily sitting with the people who are at the top of the organization, but that the expertise on any particular issue is really sitting with the person who in their daily work is doing that job every single day. And by really democratizing that level of power throughout the organization, and being able to empower people through a psychologically safe environment to speak up, that you're able to really earn that level of respect throughout for the entire team. Having core values like honesty, high integrity, respect through your actions is really important. And again, this gets to not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, right? And having that level of authenticity in your core values. So if you say that you're honest, or have high integrity and have respect, that you're actually living those values, that you're operationalizing those values, that you're transparent with your organization, that you're showing that level of respect to everyone throughout the workplace, and that those structures, those incentives to really incent that level of behavior is also in place. And above all, you really want to create a happy workplace. And the happier the workplace, again, the more connected to purpose, the more loyal your employees will become. When we asked him, what's your favorite task to create a positive workplace environment, he talked about how he goes around the factory floor every single morning and really speaks directly with employees, not just about their work, but about their lives and their personal stories. And he really said it's about remembering. It's not an exercise of hi, I'm the CEO, so I'm going to make it look like I'm trying to connect with people, but it's actually genuinely connecting with people, so that when you talk to Joe who's on the floor and you're talking to him about his son's baseball game, that the next week you ask about how his son did in that baseball game. He said that remembering the small details really matters to people. And so again, having those authentic, empathic connections with others really helps to create a positive workplace, and it helps to build more trust. And so what we want to talk about now is our third interview, and this is really related to an interview we had with Ginny Carlier, who is the Vice Chair of Talent for EY. And when we talk about different types of engagement strategies that work, there are lots of different aspects that we see, from social recognition to seeing different kinds of monetary rewards that are tied to total rewards, if you think about it in that in that perspective, as it relates to what really incents people to have certain behavior at work, what actually attracts them and also retains them to stay within the workplace. And that, again, these peer-to-peer programs giving a strong sense of belonging, and being able to give programs more learning and development opportunities so that people can see an opportunity for upward growth throughout the organization is really key also to being able to engage folks to stay more connected to their work. But as Ginny Carlier talked about on our podcast interview, she really focused in on the word empathy. And empathy is one of those buzzwords. I feel like, I've been in my professional career for about 30 years now, and I feel like every 5 years there's like a new word that emerges. But I will say empathy has been one that's sticking a little bit longer than the rest. And I think it's because there's not just the real science, the neuroscience behind the empathy muscle, and the fact that it's really been realized that it's not a trait that you're born with, but that it's a skill set that you can cultivate over time. And what Ginny Carlier really talked about is the need for more empathy, and coming out of the global pandemic with a lot of people feeling really burnt out, that this empathy doesn't start by being able to demonstrate and show empathy to others. It's also not just an exercise for leaders to be able to show empathy to their workforce, because ultimately that could also lead to burnout. But it's about demonstrating self-empathy. And self-empathy really starts with a level of self-awareness that you have for not just what's going on in your life and what's on your plate and what do you have for tasks that have to be done and how is your mental well-being, but also what are the physiological symptoms that you're feeling within your body, and can you recognize when you're feeling stressed out? Can you recognize when you're maybe going to react poorly in a situation because you're just, really stressed out and you're at your wit's end? And so being able to that need for empathy, not just empathy toward others, but empathy for yourself, is really crucial at this point in time. And a lot of leaders, they don't get it. They don't understand the impact that this quote unquote soft science has on not just the way that you can build trust within an organization, or that you can build a culture of that provides for more collaboration and communication, but that you actually will have a true ROI. You will have higher productivity. You will have better well-being. You will have lower absenteeism as a result of being able to cultivate more empathy throughout your company culture. In the war on talent, and when we call it the war on talent, this is really addressing the talent shortage. And this in particular might have to do with skills, right? Because we're seeing that certain skills are particularly in a shortage right now as we move into this new world of emerging and disruptive technology like artificial intelligence, that having an empathic culture actually is a competitive advantage. And that, again, people aren't tolerating the low pay and the long hours, but that they really want the managers, the leadership of the organization to have the empathy to understand what the workers are going through and what they need in order to do a good job, as well as to take care of themselves. Happier workers are those who feel empowered, they feel respected, they feel trusted by their managers. As a result, they'll be more productive. And again, this has a direct correlation, happy employees with happy customers. And so you'll see impact on your customer satisfaction rates as well when you demonstrate more empathy for their experience. In a EY survey that was done in 2021, over 1,000 people were surveyed, and when they were surveyed about how they felt their current boss was as it related to empathy, over half felt like their boss didn't understand their struggles at work, nor in their personal lives. And again, this is 2021, so we were in the mix of the pandemic. I think what we're seeing now in today's environment are companies that are demanding or setting these strict policies in place of return to work without much flexibility. That again, there's that sense of they don't understand everything that I have to do at home. It's hard for me to create that level of balance, that work-life integration that I was able to establish during the pandemic, and to have to kind of now take everything and return to work it's a very difficult transition. So having empathy as a leader to really understand what is it that your employees need, and if you are asking them to come back to the office, even in a hybrid workplace, that there's a purpose for them being in the office, and that you have empathy for understanding why they need to be in the office, and that you make that a most productive time, probably for team collaboration. Again, 90% of US workers believe empathic leadership leads to higher job satisfaction and will decrease turnover. And the majority of respondents felt that empathic leadership actually creates more loyalty. And this is actually true because in the neuroscience literature, it talks about how empathic communication actually also breeds more trust. And when there's more trust, then you have more loyalty with anyone that you're working with, whether it's between a leader and their employee, whether it's between a business and its customer, whether it's between a doctor and their patient. That if you're able to have this empathic communication, that you're able to establish and build more trust. And just as we kind of finish up, a few more highlights on this survey around empathy in business. Again, when it came to the company's efforts to be more empathic toward employees, about half felt like their efforts were dishonest, that they were using the word empathy, but they were really, empathy washing, so to speak, the term, and the fact that they were, again, walking the walk, but that they were saying empathy is important, but not really demonstrating that through action, or not operationalizing that through the structures of the organization. And when it came to describing an empathic leader as someone who's transparent and fair, it's really someone who's able to do that through their actions. So being able to be open and transparent, to be fair, to follow through on these actions is particularly important to organizations. And then of some of the top initiatives that this survey talked about, as far as how could you have more empathy, more open communication with the employees within your workplace, it's really about having that one-on-one personal connection. And so again, whether you're in a Zoom virtual environment or whether you're able to actually have those in-person meetings, having that one-on-one connection, maybe not just jumping into the work to be done for the day, but as Michael had mentioned at the top of the webinar, to really open with a question that kind of just resets everyone's mindset as they come into the meeting, whether it's, tell me 3 good things that have happened to you this week, tell me about something that you're really grateful for today, just really having a moment to reset so that you can move into the conversation with a more positive mindset is really important. And then, of course, providing opportunities for 360 feedback and providing opportunities for that feedback to be anonymous so people can be really honest and open, as well as learning and development opportunities. So whether it's team building, having open discussions about how you can empower your employees to help move the business forward is also really important. So before we move in the Q&A, just some, as a quick summary of some of the topics that we covered today, again, it's about cultivating a psychologically safe environment. And again, if you're interested in the Positive Workplace course, we do dive in deep as to how you actually create a culture of psychological safety within your workplace. Never give up unless someone else beats you to it. So this is really coming from Robert Langer, which is really about take the calculated risks, go big or go home unless someone else beats you to the punch. Give everyone meaning and purpose. Again, purpose-led organizations do increase productivity, increase loyalty, increase trust. And really, when you're in a volatile time as a company, it really allows people to build that level of loyalty so that they'll remain with you through those tough times, show gratitude and appreciation for their work, give credit when to others when appropriate. Again, be able to develop a culture of people asking good questions, which comes with psychological safety. And be sure to measure, look at the data, which includes asking for feedback from your employees and doing those 360-degree reviews so that you can really understand and get a pulse for how people are feeling within your organization. So with all that, we are really happy to open it up now to questions. And I think our colleague Whitney is going to moderate the Q&A.
Yes, thank you both so much. That was amazing. As someone who took your professional development program, it's still so insightful to hear all of this. And thank you to everybody in the chat for adding your perspective and sharing and joining along in the conversation. That was awesome to hear all your personal experiences. So we've got our first question. How do you work on your own happiness if you are kind of in that burnout stage and you really don't want to leave your job or can't afford to? How do you stop being that disengaged person at the back of the boat that wants to hop off the back? How do you work on yourself? Michael, maybe you want to take that one.
Sure. I love this question. I had the privilege of studying under Dr. Jane Dutton, who was with University of Michigan. She was one of our guest lecturers at Penn. She created a thing called job crafting, which was exactly for this question. What do you do if you're the unengaged one? How do I get re-engaged? They actually did a very interesting study on hospital janitors in Michigan. And they found that most of them were coming in at 9 a.m., clocking out right at 5 p.m., doing their job and going home. But they found that there were a handful who were incredibly engaged, where they would even go into a unit where they had paraplegics, and some of the janitors would change the pictures on the wall so that they could mark time. They would change their schedule so that they could clean rooms for a patient right before their wife, husband, or partner came in to visit them. And when they were interviewed, like, why do you go the extra mile? Their response was, we help people heal. We are part of the healthcare team. We know we're not the surgeon, we're not the nurse, but we do our part. We think you're going to heal better in a clean room. And so what they found was that when you really know how you're helping the people at work, you get that greater sense of meaning and purpose. So job crafting is, can you look at your job in a different way? Don't expect you're going to have a different job. Nothing's going to change but your attitude. Could you possibly shift how you look at your job into, how am I helping people? Maybe I'm mopping the floor, but how are you helping someone? And when you really dive deep on the job crafting, and I really suggest Googling Jane Dutton, there's a lot of free information out there. She has written a few books. You can probably get a lot of it for free online, but I would really focus on job crafting and focus on, who am I helping and where can I find meaning and purpose in my existing job? If you don't find that, if your current job is not in line with your current value system, do not be shy about looking for another job. It might not be a fit. That's okay. So I encourage you to try job crafting first. You can also look at Ikigai, Ikigai, which will give you 4 pillars of how to have a great job. I'll put that into the chat. And I hope that helps. We're ready for the next question.
Yeah. What is the top thing that Gen Z craves for in a happy workplace?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take this one. We just at Korn Ferry conducted a pretty big research study looking at Gen Z and what they're wanting out of the workplace, not just what they want from companies and in order to be recruited, but what do they require for their development and to actually stay with a company for any sort of length of time. So there's a couple of things. First of all, they're really looking for opportunities to grow. Excuse me. So not just learning and development and understanding that they really want opportunities to learn new skills and to understand how they can grow in their roles, but they're also looking to explore moving cross-functionally throughout organizations. So, 30 years ago when I got out of college, I entered into the workplace and I was essentially in one single silo if I had stayed there for my entire career. Whereas today, Gen Z really sees opportunities that they want to be able to bounce around and have different experiences and really experience different parts of the company and work on cross-functional projects. So being able to provide those opportunities is really important. The other thing is, and we actually explored this topic in our Gen Z panel, which the episode for the Happy at Work podcast drops today, and then the part 2 will drop next week, is that there's a translation gap, which really exists, and not just the skilling that Gen Z has versus the skills that they're being hired for, but the fact that the workplace and the employer often doesn't know all of the skills that Gen Z employee has that are not being put to good use for the company. And when we look at this deficit of skills that a lot of companies are facing right now, as we move into this time of so much emerging technology, that you likely have this huge, rich well of skilling that your Gen Z or younger employees have that you may not be tapping into as an employer. And so really just doing that level of surveying to understand what are the skills that Gen Z has, how can they really think creatively about job crafting their own roles and being able to develop the types of roles they want to move into in the future and being able to provide them those opportunities is also really important. And the third piece I would say is that more than salary, Gen Z is really connected to purpose. While we can look at young people and say, of course, all young people want to do good in the world, and that's a tendency of young people to have, there's a reason why this particular generation is different. They came up through the pandemic in their formative years. They have really grown up during a time in a post-digital world where they have had global access to information and to have an understanding of the world in ways that many of us who grew up without this level of technology really didn't have until we actually gained it in our 20s. And so being able to grow up under these circumstances, they really understand what's important, and they want to work with purpose-led organizations that are really making a positive impact on the world. So being able to really think about this strategically as a company, if you want to attract the top talent, that young top talent to your company, and hold on to them, which is another piece of the puzzle, having a purpose-led organization is really important.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tessa. I'm going to kind of group a couple questions into one because I think they're related. So can one of you or both of you talk a little bit about kind of the relationship and the importance of giving people feedback and its relationship to happiness, and kind of two personality examples that might need feedback in an organization. One, somebody who needs kind of a constant acknowledgement and a lot of attention, and the other one being like a micromanager. So how do you, whether it's, giving them feedback or whether it's kind of how incorporating their needs into a team, like how do you kind of address those? Because they're very, big personality types on a team, to make sure that your workplace is happy. Does that make sense?
Sure. So I'll start. I think there's a lot in here, so I'll start, and Tessa, please add in. As far as giving feedback, what I have found that is very helpful is to first start with this line. Do I have permission to have a difficult conversation with you? Or do I have permission to give you candid feedback? While that's only one question, what's actually happened is that you have given the power dynamic to the other person because you've asked for permission. Now, what will happen is curiosity is going to get them, and they're going to say, yeah, I want to know what you have to say. So I've given you the power because you've given me permission, which you're always going to say yes, because you're so curious about it. But also you've protected yourself. You say, okay, I'm ready that I'm probably going to hear something that I don't want to hear, but I just gave permission. So I'm not going to have those big defenses popping up. And when that happens, you can start to have a real conversation with people where they let it in. If you just hit people with, you know what your problem is, let me tell you about this, they're just going to get defensive and not hear it. So we really need to prime them first so that you can have that candid feedback. And then again, I'm so surprised how many people don't ask people what's going on. Hey, I'm not getting a sense that you're as engaged as you were several months ago. What's going on? Please tell me if there's anything that I can help with, or there's something else happening in your life. And what do I need to do to get you back leaning in? What can we do for you? So I find that just having that productive conversation, just asking that first question, allows the conversation to be more productive. Tessa?
Yeah, the only other, I mean, there's a lot that we could dive into in a bigger setting, but again, when we talk about empathic communication, it really is making that actual neuroscience-based connection with someone else. It's literally having your neurons and synapses connect. And so how do you do that? You do that with great eye contact. You do that by active listening. You do that by reading body language. And when you actually are doing this type of communication technique, you actually, again, on a neuroscience level, you're able to connect with that person. And as a result, the outcome is trust. And whether or not you really feel it for the person, whether or not you really have empathy or not, the outcome is the same if you actually practice those communication skills. And as a result, in building that trust, your communication gets easier. And there might be more ease with that person who's always looking for that level of recognition, right? That's likely a really engaged employee who's feeling a little bit insecure. So there's a reason why you want to make that level of connection so that you are able to gain their trust, to let them relax a little bit into their position. But again, keep them engaged. If they're looking for those accolades and they want to do a good job, then do what you can to keep them motivated, but also give them the confidence to know that you trust them and that they can feel comfortable in their position. For the micromanager, again, it kind of depends if you're talking about from a management perspective. Are you dealing with a micromanager who's managing you too much? Versus if you're dealing with someone who's feeling like you're not giving them enough feedback. It depends on the dynamic. If you're dealing with a micromanager who's managing you too much, again, you want to create process. And this is where the job crafting comes into place. You do have the power as an employee to make suggestions to your manager to say, listen, I would like to have a little bit more autonomy to actually be able to work through some projects just to see if I can actually move it to the next level and gain that skill set. Can we put a process in place where we can create regular check-ins, but maybe give it a little bit more time in between project check-ins or something along those lines? But being able to, as an employee, you do have power to make suggestions. And hopefully you also work within a workplace that has that 360 feedback, where hopefully in an anonymous fashion, where you're able to give that feedback of, listen, you got to give a little bit more space to your employees so that they can actually do their jobs and maybe fail if that's the case before you kind of try to jump in and take control of the situation. Certainly having those systems in place will help for that flow of communication so you don't get too, people aren't too frustrated.
Great, thank you both. Next question, what kind of components make up a good hybrid or return to work policy when you're kind of considering a diverse workforce to make people the happiest that you can make them?
We got some great advice from the CEO of Ricoh USA. Karsten Brun is managing 14,000 employees in the United States. We had him on the show. It was a great podcast. Super nice guy. He's very in touch with what's happening with the changing workplace. And basically, he said, ask them. So what I would encourage you to do is go to your teams and tell them, what's going on. We basically want you to be engaged. We want you to be productive. We want you to stay at the organization and feel like this place is giving you the meaning and purpose that you want. And it's also giving us the productivity and profitability that we're looking for. What would your hybrid workplace look like for you? And let the teams decide on their own. And what we have found from other people that we've interviewed, especially the owners of there's an app called Blind. They have 6 million tech workers who basically give the behind the scenes what's really going on. What we discovered with them is that remote workers, some of them really enjoyed being remote in COVID. And then when they were commanded to come back to the office, they got upset that they were being told what to do, lost their autonomy, and they revolted against it. What they found through the Blind app is some remote workers were lonely and they didn't want to admit it. They said that they wanted to stay at home because they wanted their autonomy, but the fact was sometimes they actually got lonely. And so they weren't really getting all the accurate information that they wanted. So what I would encourage you to do is ask them to design what works. What I found to be most upsetting to workers who are in a hybrid environment where they have to come back to the office for a day or two a week is that they don't see a purpose in it. And they get really upset when they go back to an empty office and all their colleagues are on Zoom at home. So if you're going to do this, make sure that it has a purpose and a meaning and a good reason for it, and then go forward. But people don't just want to go back for 2 days a week just because someone wants to see you for 2 days a week. So ask your people what would work best for you. And if you give them that autonomy, they'll get into the front of the canoe and be that blue engaged person because they love working here and you value their opinion. Tessa, did you want to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job with that question.
Agreed. Well, we're going to kind of move into our last question, but I just wanted to add one more time. I know I put the link in the chat, but Tessa and Michael have 2 programs this year scheduled for their positive workplace. So if this was a topic that you really want to learn more about kind of how to implement in your workplaces, it's a fantastic program. I did it myself. I highly recommend registering for it, looking into that. The link was in the chat. And with that, I will take one more question. I think this one's for all you HR specialists. HR specialists and managers, is there anything that they can kind of look out for specifically in whether it be hiring or in the people that are already working there in identifying those kind of engaged or disengaged or on the way to disengaged people? And when they say, okay, this person's disengaged, how do they start that conversation? Who do they start that conversation with? How do they kind of manage that? Like, okay, they're disengaged. I want to help them on to their next step if it's not here. What does that look like for people?
Tessa, do you want to start off and I'll finish up?
Sure. So yeah, so one suggestion I would have from a systems perspective, and then I'll hand it over to Michael for more of the manager perspective. From a systems perspective, it's data is the name of the game, kind of moving forward in talent management, workforce planning, and really understanding and getting a pulse, especially if you work for a large organization or a large company. You really need to be collecting data on the engagement of your employees and understanding what are the drivers of that engagement. What do your employees care about? Again, do you have a purpose that they feel connected to? If they don't feel connected to it, why? What are some of those barriers versus enablers that would allow them to feel more connected to purpose? What is the difference in the demographics of your organization? And again, being able to do regular pulse surveys, to be able to do that level of assessment, to understand who is your employee workforce, what is it that they care about, and being able to collect that data, that really is the future of talent management and workforce planning. And then again, you'll be able to start to recognize patterns of engagement and being able to see who are the folks that you need to keep an eye out for versus who are your superstars, who are good fits for your organization, so that as you think about hiring in the future, you can look for that particular persona of that person with those skill sets, with those competencies and those traits that really make for someone who will be very engaged in the future. So considering that level of come from a systems perspective, being able to do those pulse surveys and open up those lines of communication with your employees is really important. But Michael, I'll hand it over to you for the final thought. Sure.
If you're the HR person and you're not comfortable with this coaching or having that conversation, I like to bring a chart of Ikigai. I'm going to put it into the chat. Go to Ikigai and click on images and you'll see the Venn diagram of 4 circles. And Ikigai is the sum of doing what you love, what the world needs, what you get paid for, and I put it, yeah, sorry, I got a repeat in there. When you look at the 4, what will happen is you ask the employee, where are you in here? The 4th one is what you get paid for. And you ask them, do you love what you do? Do you feel that people need it? Are you helping anyone? Are you getting paid for it? And you'll find that if they're disengaged, they're missing at least one of the four. If they're actively disengaged, they are missing two. I find that if you're missing one, you can probably recover. If you're missing two, it might be worth considering having them work somewhere else. And that's okay. We're putting them in a different department. But I really am a big fan of Ikigai because it gives you at least guidelines on, what's wrong. If you're not comfortable with that one, you could take a look at, hey, tell me what life was like when you were engaged. And what do you need now to get back into engage? What do you need from me that we could possibly help? And at least you get some feedback, but give that psychological safety first so that they know that when they are candid, bad things aren't going to happen to them.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Michael and Tessa, for sharing all of
Thank you,
this. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you.